You're about to hear a number that sounds unreal. $1.5 trillion. That's what Donald Trump says he will ask Congress to spend on defense. At first glance, it feels like shock politics. A headline designed to stun, a number meant to dominate the conversation before anyone asks why. But here's the uncomfortable truth. If this surprised you, it probably shouldn't have. Because beneath the noise, beneath the sticker shock, this moment has been building for years. Quietly, structurally, inevitably. For decades, the United States has tried to fight tomorrow's wars with yesterday's systems, against rivals who are not insurgents or failed states but industrial-scale powers like China. So before you react, before you judge the number itself, pause. If you want to understand where this is really coming from, stay with me and share this if you think the debate deserves more depth than outrage. Because the real story isn't the size of the budget. It's the problem it's trying and possibly failing to solve. And to see that, we need to step back and define the question properly. So let's define the problem clearly. The debate is not whether $1.5 trillion is a big number. It is obviously, the real question is why this number is even on the table, especially after an administration that began by cutting defense spending. Just months earlier, the Pentagon was told to reduce its budget by 8% across a 5-year plan, roughly $50 billion a year. Then came additional efficiency cuts, $5 to $11 billion more. And the official FY 2026 request, $848.3 billion. Slightly less than the previous administration's proposal. On paper, that looked like restraint. In reality, inflation meant reduced purchasing power. Only the One Big Beautiful Bill Act adding $150 billion prevented an outright contraction. So we are not looking at a sudden change of mind. We are looking at a contradiction that was never resolved. Cost cutting on the surface, modernization pressure underneath. And once you see that tension, the scale of this moment starts to make sense. Because this story didn't start this year. It started much earlier. To understand why this tension exists, you have to look backward. Not at politics, but at cycles. For most of the post-Cold War era, U.S. defense planning was shaped by smaller wars. Counterterrorism, regional conflicts, limited adversaries. The military optimized for speed, precision, and dominance against weaker opponents. Budgets followed that logic. Big platforms aged, supply chains thinned, industrial capacity shrank. Then the world changed. China did not build a military for insurgencies. It built one for scale, for attrition, for long-term competition between industrial powers, and suddenly the United States faced a mismatch, a force designed for yesterday's wars confronting tomorrow's threats. Modernization was postponed, not solved. Deferred costs accumulated quietly, year after year. By the time the second Trump administration arrived, those costs were unavoidable. Missile defense ambitions, next-generation aircraft, fleet expansion, precise mass systems meant to be produced fast and at scale. This is not about ambition alone. It is about catching up to time. And when deferred decisions finally surface, they don't arrive gradually. They arrive all at once. Which brings us to the first real breaking point. And the first breaking point is not theoretical. It is financial and immediate. When Trump floated the idea of a golden dome for America, the scale of the problem became impossible to ignore. Missile defense at that level is not incremental spending. It is generational spending. Independent estimates suggest it could cost trillions of dollars over a decade. Add to that the Golden Fleet, add the Boeing F-47 fighter jet. Each one, on its own, carries a price tag in the hundreds of billions. These are not upgrades. They are structural rebuilds. At the same time, Congress had already authorized a defense budget far below what these ambitions require. That gap was never closed. It was merely postponed. So when you hear $1.5 trillion, you are not hearing a sudden escalation. You are hearing the backlog come due. This is the moment when strategy collides with arithmetic. And if you're wondering whether this is sustainable, you're asking the right question. Because money on its own does not buy capability. If this video is helping you see the system more clearly, stay with me. The next part explains why spending more could still fail unless a deeper mechanism changes. Because beneath the budget numbers lies a quieter, more dangerous problem. The deeper problem sits below the budget line. It's the machinery that turns money into power. For years, the US defense industrial base has struggled to deliver what it promises. Fighter jets arrive late, submarines fall behind schedule, costs rise, timelines slip, not because of one failure, but because the system itself has hardened, consolidation reduced competition, production lines narrowed, skilled labor pipelines thinned out. So even when Congress writes bigger checks, output does not scale cleanly. That is why Trump's defense announcement mattered in combination with his executive order. The same day, he directed the Pentagon to restrict defense contractors from buying back stock or issuing corporate distributions while underperforming on contracts. On paper, it sounds technical. In reality, it is an attempt to realign incentives. The message is simple. If public money is funding national security, private extraction comes second. But here's the risk. If this is only political theater, nothing changes. If enforced, it could reshape how defense companies behave or provoke resistance that slows production further. This is the hidden mechanism that determines whether a $1.5 trillion budget modernizes the military or merely inflates the system. And that tension is about to surface in a second, more personal crisis. The second crisis doesn't arrive in a briefing room. It arrives in time, because even if the money is approved, and even if incentives shift, there is one constraint that cannot be legislated away. Speed. Modern conflict no longer rewards perfection. It rewards scale. It rewards replenishment. It rewards the ability to lose systems and replace them fast. That is why the One Big Beautiful Bill placed so much emphasis on precise mass. Lower cost systems produced quickly, deployed in large numbers. But here's the problem. Those systems are easy to authorize and hard to sustain. Factories need years, not months, to ramp up. Supply chains need predictability, not headlines. And workforce capacity cannot be surged on demand. So the risk is not overspending. The risk is mistiming. If modernization arrives too slowly, deterrence weakens. If it arrives unevenly, gaps open. And adversaries don't wait for balance sheets to stabilize. This is where strategy becomes fragile. Not because of intent, but because of execution. And while this tension plays out at the top, its consequences do not stay there. They move downward, quietly, into the lives of ordinary people. And this is where you enter the story. Because defense budgets are never abstract for the people who live under them. When priorities shift towards security, trade-offs follow, sometimes visible, often not. Resources concentrate, attention narrows, long-term commitments get locked in. You may never see a golden dome. You may never touch a next-generation fighter jet. But you will feel the consequences of a system that chooses urgency over patience. You feel it when inflation collides with public spending choices. When industrial jobs return, but only in certain regions. When technology accelerates faster than social consensus. And here's the uncomfortable part. National security decisions are made before the public fully understands them. By the time debate catches up, momentum is already set. That doesn't mean these choices are wrong. It means they are heavy. If you've ever wondered why politics feels rushed, why outcomes feel predetermined, this is why. Defense strategy moves ahead of public time. If this perspective resonates with you, pause for a moment, reflect, and share this not to persuade, but to invite deeper thinking. Because what happens next doesn't stop at borders. It radiates outward. What begins as a domestic budget choice quickly becomes a global signal. Allies read it first. Adversaries read it more carefully. A $1.5 trillion defense proposal tells the world that the United States is preparing for long competition, not short conflict. It signals endurance. It signals intent. For allies, that message cuts both ways. Reassurance, yes, but also expectation. More coordination, more burden sharing, less tolerance for free riding. For competitors like China, the signal is sharper. This is not about matching one weapon system. It is about industrial stamina, about who can sustain pressure over years, not months. And once that signal is sent, it cannot be recalled. Defense spending reshapes supply chains across continents. It pulls technology into military orbit. It accelerates arms dynamics, whether leaders intend it or not. That is how global systems shift, not through speeches, but through sustained commitments. The danger is not escalation alone. The danger is rigidity. When strategies harden, flexibility disappears, and the future becomes less a choice and more a consequence, which leaves us with the hardest question of all. What comes next? From here, the future splits into three paths. The first is the best-case scenario. Congress approves higher spending, but reforms stick. The defense industrial base expands capacity. Production speeds up. Precise mass systems scale. Money turns into capability. Deterrence strengthens without panic. Competition stabilizes. In this future, the $1.5 trillion number fades into the background because results speak louder than budgets. The second path is the middle scenario. Funding increases, but reform lags. Legacy contractors adapt slowly. New systems arrive unevenly. Some gaps close, others widen. The United States remains strong but inefficient. Deterrence holds, but at a higher cost than necessary. Momentum continues, but confidence erodes. Then there is the worst-case scenario. Spending explodes. Reforms fail. Industrial bottlenecks persist. Money circulates, but output stalls. In that future, the problem is not waste, it's false security. A belief that writing checks equals readiness. History is clear on this point. Great powers don't decline because they stop spending. They decline because systems stop converting resources into results. Which path emerges will not be decided by the headline number. It will be decided by execution. And that brings us to the final insight. So let's return to where we began. $1.5 trillion. By itself, it tells you almost nothing. What matters is what that number represents. A recognition that time has been lost. That modernization was deferred. That great power competition is not a slogan, but a structural reality. Trump's defense budget proposal is not radical because it is large. It is radical because it admits something many leaders avoid saying out loud. The old equilibrium no longer works. But here is the final insight. No amount of spending can substitute for institutional competence. No budget can compensate for a system that cannot adapt, produce, and reform itself. If this moment becomes a turning point where money, reform, and capacity finally align, history may look back on this as overdue realism. If not, it will be remembered as something far more dangerous, the illusion of strength. As a viewer, as a citizen, as someone living inside the consequences of these choices, the most important question you can ask is not how much are we spending? It is, are we building the future or financing delay? If you want to keep exploring how power, systems, and global shifts really work, stay with this channel. The next video goes deeper because understanding the world is no longer optional.